Well, there's 65,000 people waiting for the Apple event. We have one.
There's just one you. All right, I'm gonna go check. Let it go. Start talking.
Welcome back to another fantasy injury report from Recharge. This is a audio test to see if you guys can hear us. Audio test. Gene sucks at fantasy football, but somehow he won. Let's see. Test. Recharge fantasy football. Good. Were we live? Like people can hear me?
Yep. Good. Still are.
People can hear me?
Yeah.
There we go.
Still are.
People can hear me?
Dun.
We never had Lance write us a jingle.
Oh, we do need that.
Yeah.
Stay tuned. We will have our own jingle this year. Don't you worry.
I am a little worried.
About the jingle?
Yeah. I feel like we really messed up. We had all year to plan for that, and I didn't think of it until just now.
Well, we still have all year to plan for it for next year. We'll get a jingle. In case you are here because of the Apple event, you are in the wrong channel. We are here to talk fantasy football in 1 minute. I don't know. All right, 1 o'clock Eastern. Welcome to the Fantasy Football Injury Report. Dr. Gene Shirokobrod here with
Dr. Cory Hough,
that is you.
Undefeated in fantasy football this year.
Both
of us.
Now, my path.
Very, very different,
Yes,
but very exciting.
it is. It was very exciting.
Yeah. Gene was going into yesterday, which was Monday Night Football.
Yep.
Heavily favored to lose.
That's a way to put it.
Yeah.
That is a way to put it.
It was like 95% to 5%
Yep.
odds of him losing. Each team had one player playing yesterday.
Mhm.
He was facing Josh Allen.
Yep.
And Gene had the Jets defense yesterday.
Yep.
And lo and behold, Allen throws 4 interceptions and a fumble or something crazy
Yep.
like that. And Gene sneaks out the way. Very impressive.
Not even a sneak. I mean, it was handed. So here's what happened. Now, I was very happy with my draft this year. Solid lineup. But I had Cooper Kupp. So he is injured. Stay tuned. We're going to talk about Cooper Kupp and his hamstring injury. So I was a receiver short. And I picked up Zay Flowers. He was still available.
Yep, good talent, but unproven rookie.
But very good report coming out of camp. I'm a Ravens fan. We're in Baltimore, so I kept an eye on him. Solid. And I had Brandon Ayuk. And not super confident in him. Like, he had a great season last year, but if you look at his points to start a season, not great. So you and I traded.
Yeah.
Pacheco for London.
He needed a receiver. I could use some running back depth. So we traded my Drake London, for his Isaiah Pacheco.
because I had a ton of running backs that I drafted. So I felt pretty good about it. And I moved Ayuk to the bench. I know. Trust me, I know. And I had Drake London and Zay Flowers starting. So Zay did great. I mean, he did very
Good for
well.
a rookie.
Yeah,
13
points. And London, how many points did London have? None
Zero.
of those. Yeah, none of those.
0 points. Not even did he have a target?
He had one target.
One target.
One target that he did not catch. So my quarterback, Lamar Jackson, literally lost more points than Drake London had. So it wasn't great. It wasn't great, especially with nearly 30 points sitting on my bench with Ayuk. So coming into this match, I was up by 4 points.
Yes. Again, with the opposing team having Josh Allen.
And me having the Jets.
Yep.
And I was fully expecting to lose, even so much that Corey, who I was playing against, not this Corey, was already talking smack about his victory, which made this turnaround even better. So, I was watching the game last night and was texting Corey. And one, we saw the injury to Aaron Rodgers, which we'll talk about in a second. And I was like, after he threw his first interception, I was like, oh boy, can it happen? Then he threw a touchdown. I was like, and that's when I accepted. It was like my first week 1, it is a loss. And then he threw another one. And then he threw another one. And then he fumbled. And then the odds shifted. It was like 77% be winning.
Would you have won even without the punt return touchdown?
Yes.
Yeah, you had already.
Once, I again thought I was going to lose when they went to overtime. When they went to overtime, I was like, there's no way I'm going to win this because he just needed like 30 yards and he would have won. And then he went 3 and out. And then I was like, I'm definitely going to win now.
Crazy turn of events.
Yeah, it was a good start. Welcome to fantasy football.
They call that a Monday night miracle.
I believe it.
Yep,
in many ways.
Started the season with one, so that's great.
So hopefully if you won, it was less dramatic than mine, but that's kind of the fun of fantasy football.
Yeah, I secured my victory before Monday night.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Literally nobody cares. All right, let's talk about the injuries. Here's if you watched this last year, we had a little bit of a rant, and I'm going to have the same rant again to start this season because I think it is true and this applies. Most NFL teams at this point do not play their starters, if at all, during the preseason. Very little time.
Even if they do, it's often one drive.
Exactly.
Which, could be 3 plays and out, or it could be maybe 10 at most. I don't know. They really do just rest them.
Yep.
So early on, I think what you're getting at is it's almost like these first couple of games end up being a preseason to some of these starters that we expect such high fantasy output, and it just did not happen this week.
Correct.
Especially from the quarterback position.
And we saw the same exact thing last year. We were so frustrated by these players that didn't deliver. And that's one side of it. They're rusty. They all look rusty because it was pretty much a preseason game for them. And we get the risk reward of playing starters in the preseason that mean nothing, but it does kind of mean something for the body that they need that real game time scenario to build up and prepare for the actual speed of an NFL game, which you just can't have that in practice. So they were all rusty.
Mm-hmm.
They very few teams had high performers aside from there's certainly some receivers.
Yeah,
but running backs weren't great. Quarterbacks weren't great. Defenses played well, which is understandable, right? A little bit less rusty, but not a great start. But there's also the injury aspect to it, and that's kind of what we need to touch on is that even ramping up in practices that most coaches do, as training camp gets closer to an end, there's always a ramp up in intensity. You can't match game time scenarios for the body. And I think this is where we've seen some of those injuries creep up.
Just to relate it to what we do here at Recharge, we are a small group fitness facility. I'm trying to make this analogy of like a new member coming on. Oftentimes we maybe shy them away from competition days early on to acclimate their body to the demands that we're going to ask of them for the cycle here. It's kind of the same. A lot of these players that don't play in the preseason, they're expecting their body to go from 0 to 100, 110 sometimes, all out in football without that ramp up period.
Right.
And as we can see, not that that's the total reason why all these injuries happen, but it's hard to deny that it could play a factor.
Yeah, and you can't fake having to perform under fatigue, and that's what game scenarios gives you. Their bodies get tired and they still have to push.
Aaron Rodgers played over four plays though. So
let's jump right in.
Okay.
All right. Enough ranting. Here we go.
I know this is a fantasy show, and because Aaron Rodgers, spoiler alert, is going to be out for the whole season.
Yep.
He is no longer fantasy relevant, but it does trickle down to all of the players on the Jets offense.
Yeah, it's a huge impact.
Yeah. Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, I know he's a running back, but he was going to benefit from a strong quarterback play. So Aaron Rodgers played 4 plays yesterday and ruptured his Achilles. I do not have ESPN, so I wasn't watching the game. I just saw the updates on the app.
Yeah.
I was texting Gene with what happened to Aaron Rodgers. I saw a video of him just standing there, and then he sat down. I was like, what is going on? From an outsider not seeing the injury, it looked almost like he just
retired in the moment.
Yeah, like he was like, I don't feel like doing this anymore. And Gene called it. Of course, he's seen stuff like this before. He said, I think it was an Achilles injury. And I was like, why do you think that? It looked like he maybe got rolled up on it.
Yep.
One of the things that outsiders or people outside the medical field don't necessarily know is sometimes complete ruptures aren't very painful. Those of you in our recharge community know that I tore my bicep tendon a few months ago, and people asked if it hurt, and it didn't. It was the weirdest thing. It hurt internally, like knowing what my next 4 months were going to be. But that's usually a sign that it's not always a good sign that it doesn't hurt. So what Aaron Rodgers did, he got sacked, he stood up. We're assuming, this is all speculative, but we're assuming it didn't hurt too bad, and that's why he stood up and thought that maybe he could play. And when he couldn't move his foot or stand on it or walk, that's when he sat down.
Yep, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
I was watching and he rolled, and I saw there's a quiver in his calf when he rolled, which is usually the tendon rupturing and rolling up, and then the calf muscle kind of absorbs it. So it's like a ripple. And as soon as that happened, I was like, that he either got a really bad cramp or it's a torn Achilles. And then that's exactly, like, he stood up, turned, and I think that's what literally his brain caught up to what happened.
Yeah.
Because when the tendon's completely tear, and Greg asked this question in the Facebook group, on our Facebook page at Recharge XFit, what happens during an Achilles tear and what does the recovery look like? And that's literally what happens. If you imagine Achilles, that's like a rope, and all tendons are just the terminal ends of muscle. So you have your muscle belly, which is like the red that you see, and then it becomes white, which is the tendon. White meaning there's no blood supply to it, or very little blood supply, because it needs to be really strong. And that tendon attaches to the bone. So the muscle squeezes, pulling that bone, which moves the joint around. So the Achilles is that rope that connects the calf muscle to the heel that moves the ankle back and forth. And when it's torn, the ankle doesn't have the same amount of movement. So Aaron Rodgers got rolled up on. He had a huge 300-pound human on him. He got up. He's like, I think I'm okay. And then he tried to move his foot, and his brain said, no, you're not okay. And then he turned around, and that's when you try to lift your foot up to walk, and it didn't move. And then that's when you see him kind of going, not good, and then sat down.
Yeah, I can understand the analysis mode that he was probably in when he was standing there.
Yeah,
I did the same thing when I tore my bicep.
You sat down too?
Well, yeah, because I felt like again, not painful, but I was like, I got dizzy because I started comprehending what was going on. But yeah, the fridge fell on me, or not on me. I went to catch the fridge.
It's an interesting phrase without context, but yeah.
Felt a pop, and I just stood there, and it was the best I can attribute it to is like a computer analyzing what just happened. Am I dying? Am I okay? Can I move? And Gene was just looking at me like, what is going on? And I went through the whole system. I was like, okay, I'm okay, but I can't move my arm. That's bad. So I think that's probably what Aaron Rodgers was going through. Talk about recovery from that. Is it always a surgery? Is it something that we can expect Aaron Rodgers to try to play next year? They've already said he's out for the season.
Yeah, Achilles injuries are tough. It's not like an ACL recovery, which is tough in itself, but that's like a 6 to 8 month process, and then you build up around it, and you can start the rehab even earlier, right, to build it up. The challenge with an Achilles tear is it's such a long recovery process. We're talking 12 to 14 months of recovery plus return to performance. Whereas when you tear your ACL, you start that recovery process pretty quickly after surgery. Like you're starting rehab right away. And you are to some extent with the Achilles, but because it's such a thick, absorptive tendon, it's a lot longer, a lot tougher recovery than an ACL tear. So will he be back next season? Obviously, that's up to him. Can he be back next season? Maybe at some point. I'd be surprised if he's back to start the season based on the tear. We're usually saying somewhere between 10 to 12 months to feel normal, and that's not even talking about return to performance, getting the actual game capacity up.
Yeah. If there's any maybe silver lining, I believe Sterling Shepard had the same thing, an Achilles tear last year on, I think it was opening day, and he played yesterday. I think he's a little bit younger than Aaron Rodgers at this point, so it's possible.
Yeah, it's a tough injury. It really is. But that further speak, like he had a calf strain during camp that bothered him a little bit. So there are signs, there are some whispers of it, and then there's going to be another debate about turf and how to play.
Yeah, I don't understand all of that. Is the turf argument that their cleats get kind of stuck in place more so than in grass?
I think it's that, and I think it's more the force. Because think about like in force in physics, there's always opposite and equal. So ground reaction forces. When you're running on grass, the grass absorbs those forces more. When you're running on artificial turf that's made of rubber, that rubber pushes up on you a little bit more. So you have a little bit more force coming up at you. So they're saying is with non-contact injuries, you'll see more with turf than with grass, but he wasn't a non-contact injury. He was in a fully dorsiflex, meaning his ankle was completely up. So the Achilles was on stretch. It was very taut. And then he had a huge 300-pound dude fall on him, and then that just ripped it. So turf has nothing to do with that, with his issue.
Sure.
So Aaron Rodgers is gone. He'll be out for the year, maybe start of next year. We'll see. Not that it matters for this season, but that's a tough injury to recover from. And like you said, I mean, that changes. Like you watching the game yesterday, they have a great defense. They have great offensive pieces. Breece Hall looked great.
Surprisingly, coming back from an ACL injury.
Yeah, and he still has a lot of burst to get back.
It was cool not cool. It was interesting to see him be explosive for 10, 15, maybe 20 yards and then just hit a wall.
Yeah.
And that's that return to performance. Yep. Breece Hall has done amazing things in his rehab to be able to participate well in week one. But return to play is different than return to performance. And if we're trying to expect Breece Hall to be the same caliber player as he was pre-ACL injury, we can anticipate that taking a few weeks to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And they even said in the game coverage that the Jets didn't anticipate or expect him to get as many snaps as he did, but he was kind of forced into it because of the Aaron Rodgers injury, and that's typical protocol for return from ACL injury into game speed is that you build up the reps to get him going, but he did look good. He looked good for the stage that he's at, so it's good to see.
We have these broken up into positions. So the only other quarterback that had some type of injury was Anthony Richardson, and it's notable because he's a rookie. He's expected to be potentially pretty good. High upside running is what he's
pretty well for his first game.
Yeah, especially for his first game. He did leave late in the game with what they call the knee bruise, but we don't expect him to miss any time.
Yep.
It's not even a bone bruise, which we might talk about with Travis Kelce,
Mhm.
it's literally he hurt his knee a little bit.
Yeah,
He bruised his knee. The coaches don't seem too worried. I anticipate him to be back next week.
It was funny. There was a quote from the game from Trevor Lawrence giving him a piece of advice saying, "Don't take as many hits," which I think is good advice at the NFL level, because for guys like that have played football all their life and played at a high level, they're used to taking hits and know how to get hit. Like Lamar Jackson, a perfect example.
Sure.
Right? He runs, but you can see he knows how to take a hit, and then when he does get caught up and gets hit hard, you're like,
Mhm.
that's atypical for him. But Richardson is a physical big dude.
Yeah.
And he goes at the tacklers instead of trying to go around and avoid the tacklers. Not a good mentality to have at the quarterback position.
Josh Allen kind of does that too, but he's another big dude.
Yeah.
He's really tall.
He's a big guy.
Yeah.
He's like 6'5".
Yeah.
But he's being tackled by other big guys, but
Right.
you just can't do that over time. So good start for Anthony Richardson.
Yeah.
I mean, I still wouldn't start him from a QB position.
Yeah, he's good for like dynasty leagues.
Mhm.
If you drafted him, you're probably gonna hang on to him because.
Or if you drafted Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, that's what we didn't talk about was who to replace Aaron Rodgers with. I don't think there was a ton of standout quarterback play this week to where you have to feel like you have to go sign this guy on waivers.
I'm pretty sure if you drafted Aaron Rodgers as your QB1, you might as well just accept that you're losing your league.
Don't listen to him, Landry. You still have hope.
You don't have hope. There is no hope if Aaron Rodgers is your QB1. I'm sorry.
My guess is Landry's gonna go out and get Sam Howell because he's a Commanders fan, and Commanders won.
Sam Howell
did okay.
Fine.
Yeah. I don't know what Landry's gonna do. Honestly.
Or if you really want to be mean to yourself, go get Derek Carr and watch him just play with your emotions. I'm still hurt from
that was last year.
Yeah,
Derek Carr's my backup right now. Yeah. Jalen Hurts is my QB1, so hopefully I don't have to use Derek Carr very much.
Yeah. Jalen was fine.
I mean,
it was a rough game.
Yeah, it was. He only had like 12.5 points, but it was very rainy.
Yeah.
So that's the game. On to running backs.
Let's talk about some running backs. I mean, let's. We already talked about Achilles, so let's touch on that. J.K. Dobbins out for the season. That's just tough. I mean, that's again a Ravens fan. He was holding out for a contract, didn't get it. Bet on himself to play. He was having a great game.
Started off good, yeah.
Yeah, he had a couple touchdowns, and then tore his Achilles.
It'll be tough for him. He's young, but he's been plagued with injuries so far. He already tore his ACL maybe 2 seasons ago. Came back last year.
Yep.
Halfway through the year, he didn't start the season, did he?
No,
was that Gus Edwards?
They both got hurt. They both tore their ACLs.
Okay.
And came back. But yeah, he was on a bit of a watch list, reps list, and they didn't let him off the hook. And then Lamar got injured, so they just kind of backed off completely.
Like you said, J.K. Dobbins kind of bet on himself. He was kind of holding out, not missing games, but he wanted an extension to his rookie deal.
Yeah.
Ravens didn't give it to him. Hindsight, from a business perspective, it worked out for the Ravens because that would suck for them to give him a bunch of money and lose him on week 1, but really sucks for J.K. Dobbins. I mean, that could be life-altering, having 2 major injuries resulting in surgeries back-to-back instead of this potential multi-million-dollar extension. If he comes back with the Ravens, it has to be on like a 1-year prove-it deal.
Probably.
See if he can perform again, and then that extension will hopefully come after that because he's a good talent. Just how do you respond after two major injuries and surgeries like that?
2 serious injuries. Achilles is a little bit tougher to get that bounce back, especially the first year. So, yeah, that's not an ideal situation for him. So we'll see how he bounces back.
Yeah. More running backs. Let's talk about Aaron Jones first because he did well. Actually, both of these running backs did amazing in Week 1 fantasy. Aaron Jones had, I think, 2 touchdowns for the Packers. After one of the touchdowns, it was funny. Did you watch it? What's the movie? He waterboyed it. He scored the touchdown and then kept running right into the entryway because he tweaked his hamstring.
Yeah.
He grabbed his hamstring, kept running into the exit. He did not return. Aaron Jones himself said that if it was a playoff game, he would have came back, but week 1 he didn't want to mess with it. ESPN reported that with hamstring tweaks, injuries, whatever you want to call it, the average return to play for a running back is about 4 games.
4 weeks.
4 weeks. Yep, 4 weeks. So that factors into an average of everything. So the tears all the way to the little tweaks. So who knows if Aaron Jones will come back next week. Statistically, it looks like he might miss a couple games, but if it's not as serious as he claims it is, you can expect him back next week.
Yeah, even a strain is just a minor tear. So I think that's an important thing. That there's 3 grades of strain: grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. Grade 1 is very sore, and you kind of tear just a few of the fibers of the muscle. Grade 2 is a partial tear, so around up to 70%, and then a full tear is usually 80% or more of the muscle fibers that are torn. So when you feel a little strain, that's still a grade 1 minor tear, which is why typical missed time is a few weeks, because even with that, it takes somewhere for the inflammatory process to be about a week to completely work through the system. So you'll feel soreness, you'll feel a little achy, even with a minor tear, which is not a good thing to have for a running back that needs that explosion and deceleration to change pace, which is what the hamstrings really do. So I'd be surprised if he plays next week. I mean, we've seen stranger things, certainly.
Sure.
But I would be looking for, if he's your RB1, RB2, or even flex, you can put him in your flex position until the official injury report is out from camp. But I would definitely be thinking about putting somebody else in.
Yeah. There were a few waiver wire picks at the running back position that could fill in for any of these running backs. Mm-hmm. Kenneth Gainwell was for the Eagles. He dominated the attempts share out of those running backs. The Eagles room is weird. They listed 4 starters as their 4 running backs as their starters.
Yeah.
It said Kenneth Gainwell / DeAndre Swift / Rashad Penny / somebody else. I don't even remember.
Yeah.
So it was a little muddy going into it, but for some reason, at least week 1, they stuck with Kenneth Gainwell, so he's an option.
Gus Edwards?
Yeah, Gus Edwards and Justice Hill. Justice Hill had 2 touchdowns coming in for J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah, that's right. Dobbins had 1 touchdown, and then Justice had 2.
Yeah, he only had 12 yards total that he ran for or something like that. It just happened to be good end zone work for him. Yeah. So I think the Ravens running back crew is to be determined on how much of a committee it'll be between Gus Edwards and Justice Hill. But it is potentially viable there.
Yeah, and here's hoping that they go out and get Jonathan Taylor. Putting that in the universe. Completely speculative, but
we talked about that before the season, before this J.K. Dobbins thing. Actually, I don't know if it was you or me. One of us said they should trade Dobbins for Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, and a 2nd round or 3rd round pick.
Right. That obviously didn't happen.
Yeah, you think they'll take Dobbins then?
No. Okay. And then last one on here, we're putting him on the list because he was the number 2 scoring running back of the week, Austin Eckler. He apparently tweaked his ankle in the game. After that point, Joshua Kelly came in and played more. They split the snaps about 50-50, increased after his ankle tweak, but he still played through the game. I don't anticipate him to be out this week, but if you do have Austin Eckler, like I do, you may at least want to consider looking at the waiver wire. Joshua Kelly is available in most leagues, and he did really well on that Chargers offense. He still had 91 yards and a touchdown, even with Austin Eckler scoring 25 fantasy points. So potentially it's viable to have both of them as fantasy relevant, but especially if Austin Eckler's out, Joshua Kelly's a good waiver wire pickup.
Yep. Let's talk about wide receivers. Number 1 wide receiver on everyone's minds, including my own, is Cooper Kupp, my number 1 draft pick, my 1st round draft pick, I should say.
Gene was in this sad scenario where I believe he could have chosen either Tyreek Hill or Cooper Kupp.
Yep.
You had Tyreek Hill last year.
I traded for him.
And lo and behold, Cooper Kupp somehow goes on the IR for 4 weeks, and Tyreek Hill scores like the 4th most fantasy points ever in a game. 41 fantasy points.
Yeah.
He was unreal. But
He was. But here's the thing with Tyreek. Even last year, when Tua was in, he was good.
Yeah.
He had a couple great games, but he was really good. When Tua was out, he was nowhere near the same player. So you are betting as much on Tua as you are on Tyreek, which, Stafford versus Tua,
That's true.
poison. But we talked a lot about Tua last year with concussions and how detrimental they can be. If, saying, worst case scenario, he gets another concussion, who knows when or if he even comes back. So from a fantasy standpoint, I just couldn't risk it with Tyreek.
And nobody's going to fault you for that, I don't think, especially in our league's half PPR, but especially in a PPR league where you get a point per reception.
Yeah.
Cooper Kupp has been a target monster.
Yeah, for like 12, 15 receptions.
Yeah. So when you're getting a point or a half point per catch, that just adds to any yards that you would get. Tyreek Hill, yards, I would vote for him. But targets, Cooper Kupp was a good bet. He is on the injured reserve, so he's out for a minimum of 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And he or the Rams actually had some good players step up, some rookies. I don't know if you saw.
Yeah.
I can't pronounce his name.
I know what you mean again.
Puka something.
Yeah. I know what you mean, but I'm not going to try to say his name.
He had 15 targets as a rookie in his NFL debut, which I believe was the most in a week 1 rookie ever, most targets.
Which speaks to Cooper Kupp. Like, that would have been him. He
Right.
would have gotten 15 targets.
Maybe
caught
more.
13.
Yeah. This Puka guy, I should look up his last name. Came in, got 15 targets. I think he caught 10 of them, and he had over 100 yards and perhaps a touchdown. Let's see. No touchdown. 15 targets, 10 receptions, 119 yards, 17.9 fantasy points.
That's not a bad rookie showing.
Puka Nacua. I think he should be on everyone's waiver wire radar, especially maybe those Cooper Kupp owners that are looking for a high volume replacement. Tutu Atwell is another rookie that, surprisingly, the two of them combined each for 100 yards, and they were the youngest wide receiver duo to do that in their debut since like 1930s or something.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
But with a hamstring injury, like we kind of talked about with Aaron Jones, the average is 4 games for a running back. It's actually more than that for a wide receiver. The idea of jumping, I think, can play a role. Landing, cutting, stopping a route, and moving forward through that. So the average out time for a hamstring injury for a wide receiver is 5.5 games. And it looks like the Rams anticipate that. He's guaranteed to be out for 4 games. That's what happens if you go on that injured reserve. Cooper Kupp's made some good recovery from, I believe he tore his ACL a couple years ago too. I'd be interested to know if this is the same leg or not, because that does happen sometimes.
Sure. And vice versa, the opposite leg, taking a little bit more growth.
Yeah.
But he's going, like, he's seeing a specialist in Minnesota, a body specialist, who the heck knows what that means. The point is that, for me, from a fantasy standpoint, I'm fine with him missing 4 weeks as long as my team doesn't completely fall apart.
Yeah.
And then him getting better so I can have him for a mid-season to late push.
Yep.
So he stays fresh more later into the season, which is fine. Obviously, depending on the size of your league and what's available, you have to take a flyer on a rookie that you didn't know. If you haven't picked up Zay Flowers yet, I think he's going to be a big part of the Ravens offense. I mean, Lamar was looking at him almost every play.
They had design plays for Zay Flowers, so that's what's cool to see as a rookie is they want to give him the ball.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the plays were designed for Puka Nacua, but he was
You're so proud of yourself.
I know. I'm excited. I have it right here. Just so I can get it back. But Stafford was comfortable giving him the ball, and a potential very good replacement for Cooper Kupp in these 4 weeks. Will he sustain that output when Cooper Kupp comes back? Likely not. He may drop down to more of a flex, or who knows after that. But yeah, good thing for fantasy is that this injury happened early on, like you said.
Yep.
Cooper Kupp can take his time recovering and return for the late season playoff push for fantasy. Another hamstring injury that is not on the IR yet is Deontay Johnson. Speaking of PPR, he's been another high volume player for the Steelers. Last year, you guys probably know this, he didn't score a single touchdown all year. He had some type of record, the most receptions without a touchdown in the history of the NFL. And then week 1, he tweaks his hamstring. They said he's likely to be out multiple weeks. So same thing as Cooper Kupp. We can maybe anticipate 4 games for Deontay Johnson. They have not put him on the injured reserve yet, so there's a chance he could come back earlier, but the likelihood is not very high. So you should be looking at other players for your wide receiver there.
Their offense looked horrific.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about Kenny Pickett. He shows he showed some good flashes last year after a couple games of shaking off that rookie rust.
Yep.
But they did not look very good this weekend.
No, he might be in that slump. Najee Harris didn't look good. He did no explosion, nothing. I mean, he was flat. I mean, it's a tough offense. So even if you're looking for a backup in that Steelers offense, I would shy away and look elsewhere.
A couple other waiver wire guys that you could look at for any of these wide receivers. Zay Jones for Jacksonville did pretty well this weekend.
Yeah.
I know that targets there might be hard to come by with Calvin Ridley going off on his first game back in 2 years.
Which you picked up too. Congratulations.
Thank you. The Kendrick Bourne for the New England Patriots.
Came out of nowhere.
Yeah, and that was kind of unexpected, but I expect him to be on a lot of people's waiver wire pickups this week for some of these injured players. Jerry Jeudy is on our list. Another hamstring injury. He did not hurt it in week 1. He hurt it prior and was out for week 1.
Yeah.
But the same thing, like we've said, we don't know exactly how many weeks he'll be out. He could come back next week. Probably unlikely. It'll likely be multiple weeks.
You sure that's not our list from last year?
I know.
Did he even leave the injury
I don't
list?
think so. I think he stayed right on the list, and I think it was his hamstring too.
I mean, if you had what's his name as your quarterback,
Russell Wilson,
I'd be on the IR.
So we talked earlier about Landry. I have to look it up. I'm pretty sure Landry's backup is Russell Wilson.
Yeah, Russell Wilson.
Another thing that I should tell them that they don't care about, but a player in our league, or a manager in our league, has both J.K. Dobbins and Aaron Jones. So his running backs 1 and 2 it was his flex, J.K. Dobbins. But anyway,
still, that's tough.
2 big running backs out for his team. That's unfortunate.
That is tough. Slugs to suck.
This is our first concussion of the year. Jacoby Myers left in concussion protocol. I did not watch it happen, but apparently he got hit pretty hard, was motionless for at least a few seconds. Kind of a scary scene, especially the couple hits that we saw of Tua last year. So he is in concussion protocol. We talked about it last year a few times because of Tua. Concussion protocol it's not a day thing. Like, it's not he has to pass a certain thing today and then tomorrow will be something else. There are different steps that he has to pass, and that time frame could be low or it could be long. We just don't know how it'll go. And there's an end to that where there's a third party, like uninvolved. It can't be a team coach has to clear him for a neurological exam. Concussions are tough to predict. There's been players that come back the following week. I think nowadays in football, they're really erring on the side of caution, which is probably rightfully so. With a concussion is a traumatic brain injury, essentially. So unlikely to play next week, but he played well, I
He
believe.
played really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's probably some extra targets going up to Devontae Adams and maybe Hunter Renfrow, but he was kind of a non-factor last week. So keep an eye on Jacoby Myers. Concussions are always interesting. Hopefully there's not a lot this year, but
Yeah, that was a tough one.
yeah. Finish up with tight ends. Two players.
The top 2 tight ends.
Yeah, the top 2 tight ends did not play in week 1. Travis Kelce with a bone bruise did not play against my Detroit Lions, and
You're welcome for that.
Kansas City paid for it. There was a lot of talk going into that game about how Patrick Mahomes is going to prove that he doesn't need Travis Kelce. He could throw to the hot dog salesman and still score a touchdown.
That's pretty much who his receivers were.
That hot dog salesman might have done better than some of his receivers.
Yeah, especially Tony.
They poor Cardate. Poor Tony. That was a brutal outing. But I was happy because the Detroit Lions won.
Yeah.
Regardless of who Patrick Mahomes got to throw to, that's a big game for the Lions to go into Kansas City and beat them on national television. Very big game for them. Travis Kelce missed the game. Apparently it was close. It was a game-time decision. Literally, he was out doing a workout before to determine his readiness. They decided to err on the side of caution, probably rightfully so.
Yep, especially with some swelling still in there.
Yeah, Kansas City is a Super Bowl contender annually, and they probably have that in mind when determining availability for something early on in that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what a bone bruise is. What is a bone bruise?
So bone is tissue like anything else. Bone, though, unlike other tissues, like soft tissues like muscle, has a lot of nerve endings. So bones really feel a lot. So a bone bruise is when you have damage, lack of a better term, to the actual layer of bone. And it takes a little bit longer to heal, but it's not necessarily dangerous, harmful. It's just incredibly painful.
Yeah.
So the downside of that is you can't normalize your function, meaning like for a football player, every time you step, you limp, and then there's swelling around that. So it kind of creates the cycle of moving, walking, running, hurting, limping, and changing your capabilities, and then the swelling happening over and over again until you let it kind of heal up. So it's not a worst case scenario. Obviously, you want to rule out like a fracture, which can happen, right? It's not, most people think of a fracture as like 2 parts breaking, but you can have like a smush fracture. You can have a little crack in there. You can have damage to the cartilage, which can happen with a bone bruise. All those things, which I'm sure they wanted to rule out, which they didn't really know late with Kelce because he had so much swelling and inflammation. So until that calms down, you can't really know the extent of the bone damage.
Would you say that bone bruises are closer in relation to fractures than people realize?
Yeah. Because a fracture can be like a superficial, like a plate fracture on top. There was, I can't remember who it was. I think last year somebody had like a tibial plateau fracture right at the top, which take a long time. A microfracture, they're usually called, to heal up.
Some people have surgery for that too.
Yeah. Oftentimes.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Not saying
up.
Travis Kelce needs surgery, but it is something to keep an eye on. It's early on in the season, and sometimes these bone bruises can linger.
They can linger. They usually do. Yeah. So understandable why they didn't put him in. There's no point in putting him in first game, especially when the knee's still swollen.
Yeah.
But by all reports, it sounds like he'd be pretty close, if not ready for next week.
We didn't have a show last week leading up to the season, but you and I talked that it was probably unlikely that Travis Kelce was going to play, even though they did say it was a game time decision. Mark Andrews did not play.
Yep.
But I kind of expected him to play. He's missed like one game.
That was the second game missed
for an injury. He missed for other reasons, but one game prior to this for an injury is all that he's missed. All that I know is it's a quadriceps injury.
Quad strain.
Quad strain. Reports from Baltimore is that he will likely play week 2, which will be greatly accepted by the Baltimore offense with already losing J.K. Dobbins and 2 starting offensive linemen.
Yep.
Are both of them out for the season?
I don't think we have reports on them yet.
Okay.
From what John Harbaugh said in his press conference, it didn't sound like they were that serious, but he also didn't give a timeline for their return. So those are big injuries. They're starting center and starting left tackle.
Yeah,
That's about as big as it gets. Both of them were unfortunate, rolling up on the injuries. Ronnie Stanley's been injured a lot as well, like J.K. Dobbins, and got paid a lot of money to be the starter, and he was one of the best in the league.
Sure.
So they definitely need him. But Mark Andrews said similar thing. He said if this was the playoffs, I'd be playing. They just kind of kept him out just for the sake of it. But they also have Isaiah Likely, who is a really good backup tight end, most likely a starting tight end almost on any other team.
Yeah, did not play well in fantasy.
Nobody on the Ravens offense.
Nope.
Aside from Justice Hill.
If you're looking for a tight end backup in fantasy, I don't know what to tell you. Just go to the waiver wire, pick who's ever at the top, because it's just a crapshoot for tight ends. If your name isn't Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews, I don't think anyone else scored more than 4 points. So it's a crapshoot for tight ends, that's for sure, and that's what it was last year too. It was Travis Kelce up here, Mark Andrews down here. There was a wider gap last year than before, and then
feast or famine.
Everyone else was down. So
you got to get lucky. Really, with tight ends, it's who catches some in the end zone. They might have 10 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're kind of looking at.
And that's what happened with who was the New England tight end? Yeah, Hunter Henry. He was the number 1 scoring tight end last week. He had 6 targets, 5 receptions, 56 yards, and a touchdown. So that's tight end output, if there is one. If he didn't score that touchdown, he would have 5 points. So tight ends are often touchdown dependent, but that's just what we come to accept nowadays. Again, if you don't have those top 2 guys.
Yeah. I mean, last night, Knox had a bunch of receptions, but they weren't necessarily, they were more outlet receptions.
Which again, in PPR league, very helpful.
Sure.
But if you're in standard scoring, then
sucks to see. Well, that's it for week 1 recap. Got you ready for week 2 with those injuries. As always, if you're watching in replay, go ahead, leave us some comments or questions if you want us to cover any injuries, anything you want to know. You can leave a comment below. If you're enjoying these, subscribe. Got a lot more. We plan on doing these every week. Got a bunch of other stuff on the channel. If you haven't followed, we got a lot of golf stuff now. If you're into golf, a lot of golf performance on our YouTube channel. So head over to @RechargeXFit, as well as on our Facebook page @RechargeXFit and Instagram. Same thing @RechargeXFit. Any closing thoughts? Puka
Nakua.
There you go. That's a name we'll never forget. All right. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you again on next week's show. Da-da-da.
Still waiting on that jingle.
Get Lance on it. Do-do-do.